also share it just so that it's up on the side. But this came up when I was thinking about treating Kebashet more as a consumer of Thoth services, because right now we have it pretty tightly integrated with Advisor into like writing results and stuff. So I thought it might be useful to create a more generic integration point and allow and have like callback URLs to the user API so that anyone can send a request with a callback URL set. And then when the results are computed, Thoth will take the results that it computed and send those back to the callback URL. And then the client can do whatever they want with those results.
So the callback URL could be, for example, an issue that is triggering advice, right? Or
yeah, so from Kebashet's perspective, let's say we have like a Kebashet client that is doing all of the advices and stuff, and it's submitting an advice, but it eventually needs to receive those results back so that it can write them to the repository. So what Kebashet would do is it would send a request to the user API requesting an advise with the callback URL set, and then when Thoth is done advising, it'll take the results that it computed and send those back along the callback URL. And then from there, Kebashet can do whatever it needs to. So it just creates a more generic integration point for services, because it could be anyone who wants to integrate with Advisor.
But it cannot be a GitHub issue because we cannot natively, we cannot write to a GitHub issue, right? So even though we would post from user API component or whatever component, we would post to that URL, GitHub wouldn't do anything with it because authentication and stuff.
Yeah, and then Kebashet would authenticate with GitHub, because Kebashet's the one that's handling those credentials, and eventually should also, I put a little comment in there, but it should eventually handle its own user stacks, and then it could eventually become a consumer of also the Kafka topics for updates, and make it event-driven that way, rather than having it as a like addition to the workflows in Thoth, if that makes sense. You know, it's kind of a big topic.
so as a client on the user API, is this a workaround to, I guess not a workaround, but does this stop people from having to pull the API to get the results, or do you still have to do that?
Yeah, it could be used as an alternative for polling the API.
Okay.
Because you could basically have some event, you could have like a URL that's eliciting that's event driven, and then when that URL receives something from Thoth, it can do whatever it was planning on doing.
That's cool.
But it cannot be something that we're going to use to replace Thamos polling, because in that architecture, Thamos would start in HTTPS server and all that blah, 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 firewalls, blah, 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 because the callback is always happening like an HTTP post, right?
Yeah, so it wouldn't really work because it's a CLI.
Yes.
So polling makes the most sense still for Thamos.
Would this be available for just like the advise, the ones that need time to resolve, or would this be for every single request?
It should just be for the ones that need time, because if it resolves immediately, then we should already respond with the result, like with all that information. So it's just stuff that takes time. Yeah.
So this is just sort of an idea of thinking out loud, but say you wanted to say you want to get a bunch of metadata for like 500 packages for some reason, which obviously wouldn't take instantly. Could you turn that into a callback request and have it continuously send you metadata responses? If that makes sense.
I understand what you mean. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a
different issue.
Yeah, and I don't think that is the architecture of a callback, right? Because Gage, what you were referring to sounds more like a WebSocket, which is continuously receiving new results if they have shown up on the query result.
Okay, yeah, I think I got those mixed up then.
Yeah.
The Stack Overflow that I found gives a pretty good explanation using like the post where sometimes you get sent like a return envelope. So they basically send you stuff and then you fill it out and then you stuff it in the return envelope and you don't have to worry about getting the address right or anything or stuff like that.
Sounds to me like a good feature, but also sounds to me like a larger one, right? Because we need to implement some kind of tracking on the user API side. So I received this and that request. I kicked off an workflow. I have observed that the workflow is done. I need to get back to the client. Did I get back to the client, error handling and stuff? So it feels like a larger endeavor, changing the server side and the client side. Is that true? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's more of like the whole like making Kevashet a client of Thoth, that effort.
If I understand correctly, so you send URL, and that URL would be propagated. User API would stay stateless, right? And that URL would be propagated to workflows, and would be kept like a context. And the last task in the workflow would say, "Okay, everything is done. There is a callback URL. Let's call it."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I don't know if we want to also allow like clients to send like a small amount of metadata that they might want to send along, because I know sometimes it's useful for like just knowing like why, like, because you might send why you originally sent the request, but we could also just let the clients worry about that and storing that state on their side.
Yeah, I think that this is good.
Yeah, and I eventually want to remove the GitHub installations table from the Thoth database.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would be private data of the Kevashet component in that case, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Frido?
So that means that cycles back to that metadata, right? So that metadata would be kept in the workflow. So Kebekhead as a GitHub application doesn't need to have like database and keep these records, but rather it will be propagated, and once the workflow will finish, it will send back this metadata so that the client application can do whatever is needed.
Yeah. Kevashet will eventually need a database because of the internal trigger type stuff. But yeah.
Is it like a database like Postgres, or it just needs to store some state, right?
Probably like Postgres, because it needs to store the
installation
current
IDs. Yes.
the installation IDs as well as the actual software stacks, so that when it receives those Kafka messages, it can figure out which repositories it needs to run for.
Well, sounds to me like interesting thing. Seems to be, yeah, maybe user experience, maybe backend, I don't know. but seems to be something that should be specced out a little bit more, broken up a little bit more in issues, because it touches some components, right? We need a new workflow task if we want to keep user API stateless. Caveat itself needs a little bit of rewrite. We need a little bit of data migration from the data migration, so the components authority over data changes. Sounds like give it a little bit more work breakdown structure by creating a little bit more dependent issues, but it sounds like a reasonable change. Do I user get something out of it? No.
It creates a more generic integration point for Thoth. So
yes,
if someone wants to create a new integration, then that's what they get out of it, is they can just send a callback URL. And we don't have to worry about what they're actually doing with the results.
Exactly. Yeah. And please make some kind of technical write-up one of the dependent issues, because that sounds like something that could be integrated in some places. So we should explain what we think and why we think it is working like that. Cool. Other comments, questions, topics, issues, blockers?
With this change, Kevin, do you consider the architecture rewrite, like Quebec's architecture rewrite, as still valid? The workers, that we discussed earlier, like having fixed number of workers, Quebec workers that are serving requests.
That is HTTP workers?
Workers on the backend side.
Yeah, it requires a rewrite a little bit, because I think it basically Caveat should have like a controller that kicks off workflows that do the work. So this callback URL would go back to the controller API, which is the same place that like the webhooks and stuff are getting received. And then from there, it'll kick off workflows for writing those results.
So the controller would basically filter out webhooks that are coming in or requests that are coming in to avoid spawning workflows. Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Cool. Thanks for that, Kevin. Yeah. Even though it is a future extension by providing an additional way of integrating our workflows, I think it's a valuable thing. That's good. Other topics today, here, now.
I have a question. It's like we have Thoth application, we have support, we have .git repository, and then the template repository. I think we should have some consensus on how we are using these 4 repositories. So from my side, I'm aware like the Thoth application is used for all the issues pertaining to Thoth, but from development side, support is from the user perspective. If user has an issue, to have that. .git, I hope that it's for just getting information on the main screen that this is what happening, but there's a template project as well. The template project has this all templates, but I think if you move those templates to .git, it also does the same thing. Is the same understanding for everyone, or is it separate? That's just my question.
Kevin proposed that a while ago, I think, and there is an open PR on the .github repo. And I found it.
Yes.
And I believe once this goes in, we can start removing the different templates from the different repos and get them inherit from the .github repo. This is in the you are here in the notes.
Yeah, my thought with that was that we could remove the templates, the issue templates from the template repo, because it just kind of simplifies template updates, because they basically only need to be updated in one spot, and there's no need to like pull them in from the template repo.
Is that .github repository always included? So it's basically a union of the actual repository plus the .github, right?
It is restricted to certain files. Not everything you put in .github is inherited, but the templates, for example, the issue templates is one of the things that gets inherited.
Okay.
I think it basically acts as config for a whole organization for a user.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh,
Great.
that's good. Yes, Harshad, I think your question is correct. Support is for end users having questions, comments, broken stuff. The Thoth application is for us, for managing the application. The rest is the application. And it feels like we could get rid of the template project, right? In that case.
I think so. That's just a question.
There are things that are not, there are things that are not inherited, but we could still move them to the .github repo, like default AICO ACI or .thoth.yaml or something like along those lines. It's still useful to have, even if it's not automatically inherited, unfortunately. But maybe we could move everything to .github. Do you mean that?
So we are making the .github repository the template project? Template repository? Feels wrong.
I think we're just putting in the issue templates in the
Yes.
GitHub. I don't think it's the template repository.
Yes, yes.
Does that make sense, Harshad?
I think so. Thanks for the information. Yes, I'll read up more on that. Thanks. That's just my question. Thanks.
That's it? That's all?
So another question would be, so time to time there are these questions from terms of ODH images. There was this question about our notebook. How or where would we discuss this? If we, as in ThothStation, should support these images or not? Which meeting is appropriate for these questions?
R is it always Julia? No, it's not, right? I can have Python stuff in R Studio. or how is it?
So it has other connectors, but can run with any other thing as well.
Hmm. I'm not really interested in that one. I wouldn't give it a high priority. If Open Data Hub people think it's valuable, send resources. We can tell you how to do that stuff, maybe. Looking from an open services point of view, I would say let's hand it over to the product owner of the Thoth service. If the product owner figures out it's a valuable feature for us that will get us a lot of adoption, let's do it. If we figure out it's just additional work, let's not do it. I think our main focus should really be getting all the data out into the world and not create more data, create more variants of things. So really selling what we got should be priority from my point of view.
So everything will result into doing more work. That's for sure. The question,
yes.
So what I understand here is the reason why we got all these images into Thoth Station were because all these images were out of Python, and because we are serving Python, this in terms serves us because we can get data, ingest data, and do some more better recommendation, right? So does that mean if someone comes with Java, then we should say this is something which we are not concerned as of now. So like Thoth Station might not be supporting it. So please get back to ODH. Should that be a good way to reflect this?
Could be a way, right? If the Java people figure out, we want to build that Thoth stack guidance feature into our Java-based solution, and we can help you with all that stuff, and it's of strategical importance to Red Hat, and it is really a feature that should be present in a Red Hat product, then we could think about that. But for now, I'd say let's focus on the Python ecosystem.
Thanks. I think that clarifies.
Yeah. I think one of these examples is Eric's request for a GitHub action, which is building container images rather than a Tecton pipeline, right? That is also something where I'd say, well, yeah, okay, understood. I see that it is a helpful feature for some people. Do we really want to invest time into creating that feature? Well, I don't know.
Well, another example, if I may, I mean, I agree with you in principle, but I wouldn't compare adding the Java ecosystem as a target with having a GitHub action image, which I believe is much, yes, everything is additional work, as Harshad said, but I don't think it's comparable. Especially, I haven't looked into details, but the GitHub action example in particular, I believe, is potentially pending confirmation. But I believe it's potentially a low-hanging fruit because we already have images, or should have images, that are capable of a container image that is capable of providing advice. So it's just about, I think, adding glue code so that this can be triggered from a GitHub action. I believe. I mean, sorry, I'm diverging, but maybe generalizing my comment, I agree that in principle, but I think one thing that would be important to do is to capture, even if we say no, I think it would be important to capture people's requests from multiple sides, so that we already at least know what others are interested in, even if we can not satisfy it.
Yes. That is why we got the support repository and keep stuff around over there, even though we are not really working on that. Does it make sense, Harshad? Is it a satisfying answer, or do you feel that we are leaving some people behind because they want RStudio so much?
I mean, they are anyway not using Thoth if they are already using R. They're looking for an image which they can run it on Jupyter. So, I mean, they're not direct customers, but I think it's more about if they want help, should they reach us out, or maybe if they reach us, we should redirect them to ODH. That's what I was having a dilemma about, because someone came. So this is not, the question just not came yesterday. It was a month ago. Someone came and asked about R and Julia images, and I said, right now we don't have sprint cycle to do this, so we keep it on hold. But now we found out Guillermo has done the work, so I just provided those images. So this is what I just wanted to know, like, even if you should put that into our sprints and discuss.
I mean, if Open Data Hub people are really interested in all that stuff, they should show up in the work group, bring your own notebook, because I think that is where we could help, right? Providing the Tecton tasks to build all these images and stuff like that, and make it a feature of ODH afterwards. But us really maintaining these images, I don't see.
Okay, thanks.
Cool, thanks. I'm not going to ask if there's any other questions, because I'm always falling in a trap. This time it's Harshard. I think on the one-on-one, Maya was having like 15 additional last questions or something like that. So speak up. Good. Thanks, everybody. Cool. See you later. Bye.